Hi guys, it's Poober here for episode 13. Thanks so much for joining me, especially in this episode because I'm very proud to show off my new science pack factory. It should be able to do one science pack per second. The only thing we need to do this episode is get it built. Now I know I keep putting off red circuits and I keep on saying I'm going to be doing it the next episode, but I got a little distracted by putting this design together. So before I get started on filling in the new science factory, I wanted to talk about the production statistics real quick in my test world where I came up with a design for this factory over here. This will be my new 1 pack per second science factory, and you can tell here it is pretty darn close to that ratio. The only exception for that, for the most part, is our military science pack, which hovers for the most part around 50, hovering maybe even a little bit higher on rare occasions per minute. And the other ones, though, which are the most important ones, red through our yellow, hover right at 60 or even higher for our science packs per minute. So that's even a little bit better than 1 science pack per second, which is something I'm thrilled about for this factory. I'm not too worried about the fact that our military science isn't quite up there with that ratio. So looking also at the 10-minute graph, you can see that the statistics are still right on target for that. So I'm very pleased with that. But now that that's said, let's go ahead and take a look at it. So when I designed this, I wanted to set out to do something that was very compact, and it included all of the science packs apart from the rocket science, and it had at least 1 science pack per second for the important science packs. This factory does all of that, plus it does look aesthetically pleasing. It's very symmetrical, and we don't have any loose odds or ends kind of hanging out on the outliers of the factory. It's all very neat and tidy. So let's start with the left upper hand side here, where we have our red and green science packs. Now this started as an inspiration from someone else's design that I kind of expanded upon. We added in a couple assemblers for iron gear wheels, and we have tons of them dispersed throughout the base. And then these feed into our red and green science packs here. The red and green science pack line then kind of feeds underneath and then kind of goes down and then all the way to the very end, or in this section over here actually. From the red and green science, we start to have our military science packs. And this starts to feed from the copper, just extending from our red and green science line. But I also add to it because that little bit of copper plate alone wouldn't be enough to feed the entire military production. So that's why I've added in an extra input of our copper plate. Here's a good example of a lot of belt weaving that I have here, and it's incorporated a lot throughout the base as well. And then here we have the actual military science pack assemblers themselves. And I do believe one reason why I don't have a full 1 science pack per second for the military science is because I've had to do a couple things for getting our throughput and our items to where they need to go. For instance, we have an example of this here where we have this one belt that delivers a grenade just to feed this one assembler machine, which is why it doesn't get quite the products that it needs. Moving just below the military science, we have a couple odds and ends that are produced that kind of fit nicely in this leftover space that I had here, but these do help to feed the supplies that are needed throughout the rest of the base. Namely, the biggest assembler machine you might notice that we have in supply here is our engines. We have, I believe, somewhere close to 20 of them throughout the factory here, and they don't all supply the blue science, but they are dispersed so that they get to the blue and purple science. But starting with the blue science here, it is kind of in the middle section and takes up the majority of that, apart from, again, the engines over here to the bottom left corner. And then we even have a couple more engine factories over here to this top right section over here that somehow I figured out how to make its way down and then get fed back into the belt lines over here. Now, I did a couple belt tricks throughout the factory that you might notice. In addition to the weaving, we've got some that go under the machines and then some side feeding, a little bit of direct insertion, but not much, but tons of little belt tricks right here. For instance, having the engines get onto the correct side of the belt so that it then doesn't need an extra track. we can instead just add it on to another underground right there. Then next to the blue science is our purple. This should all, by the way, be ratio perfect in terms of how many assemblers are devoted to each product. So the blue, for instance, has 16 assemblers and the purple has 10. And I did try to round up, so I noticed when doing the ratios and calculations that if it took, for instance, 9.3, I would round up to 10 to make sure that we got overproduction instead of too little production. So the purple science, again, feeds from the electric engines, which are down here, as well as the furnaces, which are built up here. And then right next to that, we have our yellow science. Yellow science seemed to be one of the easier things to make. It just basically took a lot of copper cable, and then that feeds into our yellow science. And then we have the modules kind of dispersed to the top, and then again kind of split off over here. Even though I do now have batteries that will be on my main bus, although it's not quite implemented yet, I did include my correct ratio for battery production, also just to make it look aesthetically pleasing by having this area filled in. So the batteries, it is the correct ratio. It just needs 2 chemical plants to produce the needed, I believe it's 0.5 batteries per second or something to supply this entire thing. So with that said, that is a lot of information to take in. This took me hours upon hours to perfect and get it exactly the way I like it, but I think it will really pay off. Not only do the statistics show that it is 1 science pack per second, give or take a couple here and there, it is aesthetically pleasing, and it is also fairly mid-game friendly. All of the assembly machines are the assembler 2s or the blue assembler machines, so there are no assembler 3s used in this factory at all. I did do that because I wanted to make sure that it was still ratio perfect as possible for mid-game, and also I didn't have to worry about getting the yellow assembler machines to be ratio perfect or to get the correct production of the science packs that I wanted. So with that said, let's go ahead and enough talking. Let's build this thing. Well, here's the Science Factory now mostly installed, and as installed as I possibly could make it at this point. The biggest issues with that will be the fact that we're missing electricity over this section with our lack of substations over here, which are still ghosted in, as well as a lot of our blue underground belts are still ghosted in, and unfortunately I wasn't able to substitute them by downgrading either to our red or yellow underground belts in a lot of these cases because we have already too much belt weaving as it is. So in that case, I was not able to substitute those. In other parts of the factory though, where we had either our green inserters or other belts, I did try and either substitute or downgrade to other products where I could. A good example is the blue science here, where I primarily had our green inserters or our blue underground belts to deliver the end products to the left-hand side over here. But they are now substituted with all red underground belts in this section over here, and we're only using our blue inserters throughout the entire thing since we don't have the green inserters yet. But with that said, it is going to be mostly up and running once we hook it up to our main bus. So let's go ahead and do that now. And thankfully, once we get our green and red circuits available, we should be able to have our blue science fully operational once that is done. So this is already kind of fed from the main bus. Either the top is ready to go for planning for the future, but we have our other products like our iron plate over here ready to go, and then as well as our copper plate and other products like our iron and steel over here to the right ready to go as well. So we'll go ahead and just start to hook these up, and then we'll see what starts to run. Hopefully everything will be running that possibly can, that is. And with that said, even though we're going to be hooking it into our main bus, I do realize that this is likely not to be up to the test world rates of 60 science per minute. And that's probably going to be a throughput issue where we just don't have enough of our main bus products coming in to feed this entire thing. It's probably going to take several more lanes worth of our iron plate, for instance, and our copper plate than what we have available. But even a little bit is better than nothing. I'm just frankly happy to get something up and running that is superior to our mini base starter setup. And I think I'll leave these in here for now so I remember what products will be going in here when we finally do get them. But you can see it's beginning to slowly feed itself in here. This will definitely be a huge issue. We're not getting nearly the throughput or the compression on the belts that we need to fully supply it. So either I'm going to have to rework how I feed the factory from our main bus here, or I'm going to have to bring in either some trains to supply the factory or add on a couple more belts to the main bus line. Let's see, our copper plate though, it looks like is getting to our yellow science pack area where it should be. And I'm trying to just kind of survey here and see what is and what is not working or getting the products. Looks like this will be working. This is mostly to supply our green science, and then these things are needed for the blue science, and that's thankfully working because it's the blue science which I primarily want working. What about our engines? Our engines are working. Good. So what do I need then to start getting the blue science packs? Looks like I'm not going to be able to get them up and running obviously until we get our green or red circuits. But I think that is the only thing I will be missing to at least start getting some supply of our blue science. So we'll need that. We'll need the engines, of course, and then the miners, and the miners are going to be bottlenecked because we don't have the electronic circuits yet. Let's see here though. Blue science, why are you not picking up? Oh, I need to fix that inserter, it looks like. That is why this one is not working. Glad I caught that. Alright, but it is working, kind of. We've got our engines coming in, which will be great. So I think what that means is I have one last thing to do, and that is to finally bite the bullet and get to our circuit production, which I have been putting off for quite some time now. I think what we'll do is fit our green circuits in this section over here and fit our red circuits over here to the right-hand side from our main bus. And then we'll just have the products feed into our main bus as well. And then eventually this will be able to get the circuits themselves. One thing I do regret is that I didn't make this more of a vertical orientation though. What I should have done is put it more like this so that we had more room on either the left or right hand side for the circuits. But I didn't think that far ahead, unfortunately. Maybe one day when we get some bots we can rip this up and replace it. So one last thing I want to do before we quit today's episode is to at least place our green and red circuit factories down so that I can work on them off camera. So the green blueprint I'm going to be using here is actually not credited, but I believe it was an inspiration from Nilaus's design. I do think I want to just kind of fit as many will fit in the width of our science factory here. And I do want to line it up with the belt line here and then make sure it is even and switch the orientation. And I think that will do it right there. And let's just add on a couple more tiles worth. Here we go. Whoop. That should be fine for now. And then we'll do the same idea of placing down the blueprint with our red circuit factory. And this factory I'm going to be using is actually Madzuri's red circuit factory, which I believe he was inspired by someone else on for that matter. But we're going to be placing it in this section because we have more room and this is definitely longer than the other green circuit factory. And this is only about half the blueprint that Madzuri has available, but this should still produce enough to at least get us started for our red circuits. And it's hard to see with all of the red that is appearing, but I'm trying to just make sure that we have the belts coming in the direction I want, and I think that means I want it to go this way so that the product line gets fed toward the bus. So let's just make sure it's lined up again with the copper line over here, which it is, and find a good middle ground, and I think that's pretty good. And there we go. So we have now both blueprints down, and I'm going to go ahead and just fill these in off camera. You guys don't need to see that again this time around. But that way we'll have red and green circuits to play with for next time in episode 14. So I hope you'll join me then for that.